Hello, this is David Haley, and I am the CEO and founder of Countalytics. We are a computer vision inventory management company, and we help our clients save money with their inventory processes. Welcome to the next episode of Count It Up, where we are privileged to have Clyde Hutchinson on. Clyde Hutchinson is a partner with Journey Partners, and he is also runs and the founder of the innovation lab for Viva Air, which is based in Colombia, South America. How you doing, Clyde?
Good. How are you? You're in Atlanta today, or whereabouts are you?
I am in Atlanta. I've been in Atlanta for the last 6 months, at least. No, I guess 8 months. 8 months. I haven't left. Well, I take that back. We did go to we have a hospital client in North Carolina, so we did go there in January. But after that, things have been kind of shut down. So,
yeah, I've had people phone up checking my mental health because they said anybody who's suffering for not being on an airplane is you. So everybody's going, "Are you okay that you're not on an airplane?" I think
that's very true. That's very true. You're one of the only people I know that probably spends more time in the air than on the ground.
Yeah, no. Last year it was I did over 250 flights, and I said at the start of this year I promised myself that I was going to really reduce flying. So I'm probably the cause of COVID because I made this promise that I was going to slow down flying, and I've been on 5 flights this year. So don't worry. As soon as I can fly, I will be flying.
I'm sure you will. So can we talk a little bit about kind of your background? I know you are originally from Ireland. I guess you're in Ireland now, correct? You're in Dublin?
Yes. Yeah.
Can we talk about a little bit about you and how you grew up, where you grew up, and how you ended up being the man you are today?
Well, I think my love of travel came to the fact that I grew up on a farm. So therefore, I wanted to get away from that as quickly as possible. So I grew up in the northwest of Ireland, which is a kind of, at that point, with the mixture of the troubles which were going on in Northern Ireland and the economic situation, it was actually one of the worst areas in Western Europe for employment, but also the economy had been very largely based on agriculture. So when I was growing up, my strong will was to get out of there as quickly as possible. And I think this hits many people who are, and I think that's why I've always had a respect for education, because that was the only avenue I could have to get away. I know my mother will love this when I say that I was desperate to get away from her, but I think that was really important for me, and I think that's what led for me to have my first career. And I see myself as someone who's had multiple careers. And you joked earlier about having to look at my LinkedIn and go trying to work out what my background is. And I think my first career was very academically driven. I didn't find school particularly easy, but I found university really easy. And I think the reason I found university easy was because you were self-managed. You had to self-learn, self-teach yourself, and I do the process, which really suits my style better. I'm not one which is generally very easily told what to do, and that's why I probably struggled with school a little bit. But I think universities, I really felt I really had that questioning capabilities, and I really loved being in a university setting.
Okay, and I guess that's how you ended up with an MBA and a PhD and all those other letters behind your name.
Yeah. Well, the PhD actually came around where I was offered more money to do a PhD than what I was going to get as a job. So it was a very quick decision to do a PhD. So I got a scholarship, a full scholarship to do my PhD, and ironically from a company which manufactures nicotine. And at that time I was a smoker. So I thought there was some divine intervention that this anti-smoking company was offering me a PhD to look at. My PhD was looking at cancer research. It was a cancer research PhD, and I think for me, the whole process of doing a PhD again suited my later life because it was all about you were taking risks with your experiments, but you were trying again and again to iterate what you're doing and trying to change due to the information, but also what is available. So being trained as a scientist is really useful for what I do now because it helps me with the analytical points, but also it helps you with that looking at iteration as a way of improvement.
Okay, interesting. So a lot of most people probably don't know that. So we met originally at a future travel experience conference in Las Vegas. At the time,
you should have made that sound a little bit more sexier. That we met at a conference in Las Vegas. You could have said.
Okay, I'll say that. We had just started Countalytics, and Countalytics was a finalist for a JetBlue competition, and so we had a booth, and we were telling people, selling Countalytics, and if I remember correctly, you came to our booth, and you were actually our first Twitter follower, if you remember that. And when we were talking about Countalytics and what we did from an inventory perspective, how in the beginning we were focused on airlines, how we can help airlines save money using computer vision and deep learning, you came in, you seemed immediately interested in kind of what we do. So how did you transition from your academia world to an airline travel world?
Well, I think my challenge with academia was that it can be really unsatisfying because there's not effort equals reward. Mm-hmm. So you can work 100 years in academia and not be successful, and someone could be very, very lucky. And I think that element was becoming more and more frustrated. Also, I was becoming more and more entrepreneurial in what I wanted to do. And then the opportunity arose for me to work for a consultancy, which helped around spinning out of companies, but also early stage companies when they've just got their first investment round for VC. So how do you build a company once you have received investment? How do you make the investment work in terms of people element? So for me, you can have the best idea in the world, but unless you have the right people around it, it's really difficult for that to be a successful company. And I think it's really important. And I think sometimes this is forgotten, the people element, and how people are most important to how companies grow. And people are the biggest resource in companies. And I think going back to where you were saying how we met you, that was one of the things we shone out for you, is not only your personality, but also that you, for your auditing experience, had really spotted this problem and then went, how can I find technology to solve this problem which I've spotted as an auditor? How can I use technology to improve the auditing and inventory business? And I think for us, that was what interested me the most, was that you had actually used your background experience and then went, how can I find technology? And I think the problem I often find with technology companies is that people start with the technology and not the problem first, and don't use their wealth of experience to see. And I think as a scientist, a lot of work that I did and actually published papers on was looking at networks and how networks affect one another in an ecosystem. And then when I moved into business, that became really important, how important it is to read how important the network effect is, and how important it is for people to connect to each other to lead to another element. Just like us bumping into each other in Las Vegas led to a whole series of weirdness for you.
Exactly.
and, discovering places, spending Thanksgiving in Ireland and other things which your family may never forgive me for, but
No,
but that's
it was fun. I think it was, and I totally agree with you. The reason we started Catalytics was because we saw a problem. Like we
yeah,
saw an inventory problem, and we knew the details of the problem very specifically. And we were thinking there has to be a solution for this, and we can't be the only people that are thinking that this is a problem, right? And so that's one of the reasons that you become an entrepreneur, because you see a problem that's big enough that you want to tackle.
yeah. And I think that's where you have been able to then spread that into different use cases, because it's not just, initially you looked at airlines, but it's not just an airline problem. It's a problem for anybody who has any type of inventory has this same level of challenge. But I think if you were younger, you may have not identified this problem. It took your experiences and the people around you so that you could see that problem, but also then, and I think that's also another reason why being in Atlanta is important for you, because there's an ecosystem there in Atlanta for you to be able to look at the technology, but also there's a support network in Atlanta, and I think that's an important element as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like how you just call me old, which is fine.
You called me fat at the start, so I was waiting for a moment
to squeeze it in. But, the funny thing is, you're exactly right, because when we started, it was a specific airline problem, right? And almost immediately, we had interest from other industries. I mean, our first official client was a lumber yard. So you remember this? Like we were taking pictures at a lumber yard, helping them increase efficiency, saving money, and taking pictures of lumber to not one person. They had one person that counted every day. They've been able to allocate those resources somewhere else and save money to now using our platform to count their inventory. So I totally agree.
And also, I think in a post-COVID world where the people are looking for digital solutions where it used to be laborly intensive, such as inventory, having this kind of digital resource for companies is going to become more and more important as well. So I think I'm trying to look for the positives after a post-COVID world, as being someone who's involved in aviation and travel. But I think one of the elements which we've definitely spotted is that this is the moment of digital transformation, where a lot of conservative industries have been on pause in terms of digital transformation. Now, because of this horrible circumstance, they've been catapulted into having to look at digital solutions such as the one of Analytics. And I think inventory, this is really the moment where inventory is going to become more and more digital.
Yep. No, I totally agree with you. And we've seen it in the interest that we've received. Again, like we were working almost exclusively with airlines in the beginning, but now we've got interest from hospitals, right? We've got interest from warehousing companies, interest from retail spaces. So I think it's a lot. Even the hospital case is very interesting because there's another industry that I would say is very, I guess, slow moving in a certain sense to be nice.
You forget to say conservative in the US is always a bad term to use. So I'll use slow moving.
I can use conservative too. I can use conservative. It's very patient centric. Like their main concern is the patient and the doctors, right? And so a lot of those other things are somewhat secondary, don't get a lot of focus. And so we've had hospitals come to us and say, hey, we think we can use computer vision to help us with our inventory, especially when we're trying to reduce touch points. We're trying to reduce people touching a bunch of stuff all the time, every day, all day. Can we count it using pictures? And we say you definitely can. So it's definitely been a change in thinking for us as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people look at it. And I think that's where I've always tended to work in conservative industries. So I'm always used to people thinking that Excel is a form of witchcraft. So for me, I've always been trying to push digital transformation. So I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in travel, and I've worked in sports. So the three, to me, those areas are the three most conservative areas of people not liking change.
Right.
And I think that this is really, I think a lot of us in March were, as I constantly say, I was standing in the corners rocking a little bit because suddenly everything I knew in the world had suddenly closed. So,
Yep.
but now people are saying, well, actually, here's the opportunities coming through with COVID. And I think that's where I think some of the things which we've been doing during COVID has been going, okay, what can we do now? How can we work with COVID? How can we get people back in there? How can we get people their confidence back? Or what does this world look like now? And how can we help? And I think that's why solutions, which are, as you said, just in touch points, are going to be more and more successful now because people, I don't think we're going to go back to the world we lived in. Maybe in Florida. I think Florida will never change, but I think everywhere else will still change. But I think that's where you're going to see that this is the moment where finally people are going, actually, I need to do this. And this is not only the bigger organizations, these are the smaller companies are now saying, well, actually, yeah, I need to actually bite the bullet and do the digital transformation piece.
Yeah, and I think we see it. I agree with smaller organizations, but even if we step back to airlines for a second, I think we're starting to see, because the airline industry is going to turn around, right? We know that. It's just the question of when, and then what will the industry look like? And so we're still having constant conversations with airlines and just saying that we know the airline's going to look different, and how can we be more efficient, right? How can we make sure that we are not the airline we were 12 months ago, or 6 months ago? I think that's the question we're seeing.
I think I think there's two elements here. I think in airlines, the challenge now is that efficiently well-run airlines, such as low-cost carriers, are going to be are showing that they're going to be fine. The problem is that the larger airlines, which have not had efficient management systems, are suffering difficultly and are suffering more, because in the new world post-COVID, they're going to have to be really managing costs. And costs, it's going to be a really cost-efficient business. There's going to be a nasty price war coming out of this. It already has started. Like, I'm coming over to Las Vegas for a conference in January. My flight cost $200.
Wow.
So therefore, it has already started that prices are down, and for airlines to make a profit, they need to be efficient, and larger airlines are going to have a real problem with that, where you have in the US, where you have airlines such as Spirit and Allegiant or Frontier, and actually Frontier is probably the one which has been doing a lot of this work so far. Okay, some of their publicity has been a little bit ropey in terms of the messages they've been putting out, but they're going to be in a better challenge. I think the airline which is probably going to suffer the most is actually Delta, because Delta had a huge range of programs which they were about to deliver in digital, and actually were really ahead of the field in digital transformation. And you've had to see those being stripped back and cancelled and brought down. But I think Delta's going to be fine, because Delta was a profitable business, because they had a really good auditors before then and an auditor system. but I think it's going to be difficult for airlines. I think people who want to travel again, in the US, the reports I'm getting from certain airports, they're back up to 75% already at peak time. the surveys I've seen, that's roughly the figure I'm seeing. I'm saying 75% of people will travel again. I think what won't happen is people traveling so much for business. I think that's where it's going, and that's again will harm the American Airlines, the Deltas, and the Uniteds more than the low-cost carriers, especially in the US, because people are still, as you see already, people are still going to go to Florida, people are still going to go to Las Vegas, people are still do that. So I think I'm completely positive that airlines will come back on their feet, but I think now, what just as we've seen the area of digital transformation elsewhere in airlines, it's the low-cost model now is going to be the most successful model. What we have seen is that airports have accelerated into being digital now. So airports have spent years thinking about biometrics and obviously analytics biometrics is and allied technology. This has led airports to suddenly be able to jump forward and start to look at these policies. They're looking now at robotics. They're now looking at other elements. So I think airports are going to be a different arena for people to be in, and I don't think that's a bad thing because airports tend to be not the nicest places, especially in America. There's some North American airports which are not somewhere we actually genuinely wanted to spend time in, and now post-COVID you probably don't. But I think for me, I have to be positive in aviation, but I feel that people will still want to fly, people still want to travel, people will still want to go on vacation.
I agree. I think that the love for travel is not going to stop. And I think it's going to continue. But I agree with you that the airlines have to be more efficient, and they're going to, because you're going to have to be efficient, and you still have to be competitive. And I think that is the line that you'll cross, where in the past, airlines had so many products, so much inventory they were offering their clients. And they're going to have to find that balance between, hey, we have enough products that you want at a price that you're willing to pay. And I think that's the conversation that we've had from a perspective. We have a ton of inventory. How can we count it better? How can we be more about what we put on the plane and what's being used on the plane? And that's the kind of thing where Conalytics steps in to help.
And especially, I think especially now what Conalytics does is potentially more important for airlines because it will be that one item of missed inventory could be the difference of profit or loss per flight. And I think previously airlines, there's always been the massive an airline traditionally makes the same price as a Big Mac per passenger per flight. That's going to be decreasing. Right. So therefore, every single way that an airline could make sure that their inventory is calculated for means that they're not losing money. So I think that's going to be crucially looked at as a way of how can we show that we're making revenue. And I think that's going to be really important. I think the whole focus from the next 2 years is all going to be revenue for airlines. So any way that they can show that they're making revenue is going to be benefit, because obviously a lot of airlines are going to be ones which are not going to be governmentally bailed out are going to be severely in debt. So they're going to have the spotlight on them, and they're going to have to look at efficiencies. And I think inventory management it's potentially a low-hanging ball for airlines to do, and using technology such as Conalytics.
Yeah, how are you seeing, because you're in, we all know you have many jobs, but you're in the airline space and you're also in the startup ecosystem as well. Yep. How are you seeing the startup world change these last 12 to 6 months, really 6 months?
The last 6 months, I think the last 6 months, startups have had to go into survival mode. If you're in aviation or a travel startup, you need to look at how can you diversify what you're doing, or potentially pivot so that you have enough revenue coming in to support you and potentially your team to the point where you can get people back into the air or get people back into tourism. And I think that's the challenge there is. I think raising capital is always difficult. This has not made it any easier. There has been deals made, but I feel that there is going to be potential coming through with the larger companies where they're potentially going to have to acquire technologies or going to acquire startups because either there's going to be value there for them or it's going to be a way for them to be able to survive themselves. And I think it's all dependent on how the next 6 months play out. If there's a massive second wave of infections coming out and we're almost a year without aircraft, it's going to be really, really difficult. And also difficult for countries as well. So countries which are dependent on tourism for their GDP. So especially in the Caribbean, some of the Central American countries are going to see it very, very difficult to be able to survive if this continues on. But my view is hopefully by this stage, by January, we'll be at a stage where we're potentially at a vaccine and we could potentially get things back in order. I think, as you said, I have a dual function. So with Propeller Shannon, we've invested in 19 early stage companies. The 19 of them are still operational. So we're showing that there is certainly that resilience in the startup field. But it's difficult. But a lot of them have been able to access support mechanisms or do consultancy or do just as Analytics is not just an aviation company. They've looked at other elements of it. How do they can use their technology in other services, or how can they actually be involved in some of the response around COVID? And I think it's going to be, I think, genuinely feel positive. We've made a decision not to run the Propeller program this year, mainly because it's going to be virtually impossible to do. It's impossible to get people to travel, and also it's a difficult time to be looking to do partnerships with airlines, looking to do other elements.
Thanks.
Joe, you just record what I'm saying, and then the kids will fall asleep.
Yeah, no. Everybody listens. So you're like, what was it, E.F. Hutton? When Clyde speaks, everybody stops and listens.
No, I wish that was the case. But I think I have to be positive. And with Viva Air, so Viva Air, I founded the Viva Air Labs, which is the first aviation and travel innovation labs in the whole of South America. So we have a team of 3 at the moment working there, and our focus has been how do we get people back in the air? How do we make people feel confident about flying? How do we make sure once we get the planes back there, because still in Colombia there's no planes are flying, we're only doing humanitarian flights. How do we make that experience that people want to fly again? I think we're kind of lucky. We've got a brand new fleet of aircraft. We have HEPA filters. To me, I feel genuinely it's safer to be on a plane than it is anywhere else. So I think how do we get that message out, and how do we get people back into the planes?
What are some of the things that Viva is doing, I guess, from an innovation perspective, that you see will be positive and lead to a faster recovery, right? I know we talked, because Viva is a low-cost carrier. I know we're talking about how they have to be efficient, how they have to make sure they're paying attention to revenue, but also margin, right? That profit is so important. So what is Viva doing to make sure they're
I think one of the good things about Viva is we run efficiently. So And in Latin America, what has happened is that both the main competitors are having severe difficulties. Avianca has declared bankruptcy, and also in certain territories, LATAM has declared bankruptcy as well. So it's going to be difficult for more the legacy carriers to bounce back from and be efficient rather than an airline which has started being efficiency and having a very clear line on how to make revenue for every seat. So I think having a strong focus on efficiency, both in terms of the running the airline, but also how do we cut costs at every aspect, has made sure that the prospects that are going forward is a lot promising. We do have a new fleet. People want to be on a new plane. The polls I've seen in Colombia have been that people want to go back to see their families. A lot of people haven't seen their families because the difference in Latin America, you have the Andes running the whole way down South America. It's difficult and unsafe to travel to meet your family because you have to go over mountains. It's a long journey. Roads are not safe. And Viva was the first airline to really give people in South America that opportunity to fly, because previously they wouldn't be able to afford to fly because often even getting to the airport was so expensive and it was out of their reach. Now having flights which are averaging around $30 is allowing people for the first time to be in the air, meeting their families, doing business, and people are actually genuinely grateful for Viva Air because that gives them the opportunity. I think one of the things we really are going to be looking at is, as a startup airline, how do we help small and medium businesses, the SME community, how can we help them recover as well? And I think that's really important because those are the industries which have been really heavily hit by COVID, and we understand that because we're a startup airline, so we understand the struggles it is to really start to get that traction in the market. And we've been looking at those areas. We also want to how do we make sure that people feel confident? Because we're confident that our airplanes are clean. We're confident that you're going to be safe in our aircraft, but how can you make people feel that they're going to be safe on a plane that they can be anywhere else? And I think that's one of the things which we've been really focusing on, is those two aspects. But generally, people want to fly again. Right. I think I was having a conversation last night with an investor at Colombia, and she was saying that she has a picture of Cartagena and she really just wants to get to the beach. She said this is the longest time in her life she hasn't seen a beach. And it's important. And I think that's important for people. It's that they see it's not like other geographical areas, not like you in Atlanta where you can just jump in a car and travel down. In South America, you really are dependent on air travel to get from different areas because it's either not safe or it will take too long. So I think that's an important aspect for it.
Yeah, and I know Colombia is just different as well because you have to be efficient because majority of your passengers have not flown before, right? So your main competitor is probably the local bus system, right? Yeah.
Actually, and it's actually probably more so in Peru. I think more so in Peru, you can get up to 30% of passengers have never been on an airplane before, so they don't know the procedures behind an aircraft. They don't know the procedures in an airport. And I often have this conversation with the guys in Swoop in Canada, where they have the same figures, but in Canada, Canadian passengers are a lot different than people in South America. They turn up to the airport 4 hours early. And they've read every single measure. Their luggage is perfect. If you think about it, if you've never been in an airport or an airline before, you don't know the rules. You're used to traveling on a bus where you turn up 20 minutes before the bus departs. you have everything with you once, you don't understand luggage requirements. So we've had to do a lot of educational point of view around how to travel. And you have to do this in a way where you're not preaching at people. You have to say, listen, I know you haven't been on a plane before, so these are aspects where you may be interesting, because if you haven't been on a plane before, how do you explain to somebody what turbulence is?
Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge.
That's very true. It's funny you mentioned luggage, because that's one thing that we at Countalytics have been asked to do, to research into, looking at luggage, the size of luggage, and the amount of luggage that comes onto a plane. That I think we didn't really think about that. So you think about problems that you might have from a Viva perspective that other airlines might not have. We've been asked to do things that we haven't even thought about doing, from a company and a computer vision standpoint, that we've been asked to do. But when you said luggage, it just spurred my imagination, because it's like, hey, we never thought about luggage.
I think luggage again, if you look at post-COVID world, is actually going to be a good area to focus on, because a lot of airlines are toying with the idea of banning all onboard luggage and all luggage going on. And if you can imagine in North America what that's going to look like.
Problem in North America with no onboard luggage.
So therefore, there's going to be extra pressure in checkout that there needs to be some kind of image analysis system, which is making that process quicker, because you don't want people sitting arguing. And what we find through some of the studies I've seen is that people don't tend to argue with an image analysis, but they will argue with a human who's weighing something. Well, they'll argue going, that is not 110 pounds, that's 106 pounds.
Right.
And if it's a computer saying to them, listen, we've measured your luggage, it's not the right luggage, or you need to reduce it, they tend to be more obedient or more compliant with the computer than they are with a ramp agent or someone who's on
That's
the ground.
Especially if you can take the human out of it, right?
Yeah.
And the person potentially takes the picture themselves.
I know
right?
people who are videoing Karn videos in America will be criticizing you because you're taking their business away from uploading Karn videos on Facebook.
We're just trying to help. We're just trying to.
Well, maybe that's what you should call it, an anti-Karn imaging device.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, no, man, this has been good. I thank you so much, just for your insight. It's really been helpful. I've enjoyed talking to you, getting an understanding of, one, you've sat down long enough to have to talk to me for about 30 minutes, because usually you're always on the go on a plane and traveling from continent to continent.
This is I've got another 4 hours for this. So don't worry. I'm not slacking off.
But no, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your help in the journey of Countalytics. Truthfully, just helping us out when we need advice and we need to talk to somebody. You're always there with connections and things like that, and introducing us to other people in the industry. So we at Countalytics really appreciate the help you've given us.
I'm happy to help. And how hot is it in Atlanta at the moment?
What's that?
How hot is it in Atlanta at the moment?
Around 89, 90 today. So relatively warm.
We hit the 50s in Ireland this week. That's how you keep the infections down in COVID. You make it so cold that nobody wants to leave the house.
Heat on in July, I'm sure.
I have the heating on today. It's freezing.
Well, Clyde, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on an episode of Count It Up with Countalytics. It's been a real joy, and we'll be in touch, man. I'll see you around.